I'm very grateful to my noble and learned friend for allowing me to speak ahead of him. I would like to speak to the three amendments that I've tabled in my name, and I should declare that I chair the Communications and Digital Select Committee, and I have tabled those three amendments with the full authority of the committee because they follow the work that we have done over the last year or so, inquiring into the practice of slaps, and we have also been in correspondence with the Solicitors Regulation Authority, and that correspondence is available on the committee's website. So my amendments are 87, 88 and 89. I'm very grateful to the Noble Lord Cromwell for signing all three of them, and I'm very grateful to the Noble Lord Folkes and the Right Reverend Prelate, the Lord Bishop of St Albans, for signing 87 and 88. And I would also add, in a personal capacity, I support the other amendments in this group, both that from the Noble Lord Thomas and from the Noble Lord Cromwell. We heard at second reading a very comprehensive description about the impact of slaps against journalists and public bodies, and the Noble Lord Thomas has also given us a taste of that in his opening remarks, so I won't go over any of that again. I suppose in very simple terms, if you were looking at the three peers and our three different amendments, if I briefly can sort of describe mine as one, I would say that Lord Thomas is tackling this from the perspective of the rich and powerful who abuse the legal system. Lord Cromwell is seeking to introduce provisions that support journalists or public bodies in mounting a defence against that action, whereas what I am trying to do by virtue of my amendments is deter and prevent solicitors from actually supporting anybody or the rich and powerful, as is normally the case, in bringing forward this action in the first place. I should say that, just to describe briefly, that first what I'm trying to do is make it explicit that this is amendments 87, 88, making it explicit that solicitors can't accept clients who want to abuse the legal system to avoid or suppress information that could be relevant to economic crime, and by giving the regulator clear power to fine and sanction if solicitors do breach that rule, and second, by making it clear that dirty money cannot be accepted for fees when the purpose of the action could prevent someone being subject to the justice system. Now, just to unpack that a little further and focus for a moment on 87 and 88, at the moment the SRA can fine traditional law firms and solicitors up to £25,000. And we know, of course, how small a sum that is when we are talking about some of the very large and powerful legal firms involved. Strangely, the regulator can fine different types of law firms, what are known as the alternative business structures, up to £250 million, but this applies only to those kind of category of firms. So there is a sort of an odd discrepancy there. The Solicitors Regulation Authority has itself recently criticised the inadequacy of the £25,000 limit and called for it to be addressed. And my amendments are very much in line with the bill's aims because the bill already removes the regulator's fining cap for a narrow set of economic crime transgressions. But it does not specify that this will be applicable to slap cases that relate to economic crime. And what the SRA itself has said is that the bill's tests are tightly drawn and the numbers of relevant cases which will fall within them is limited. So my amendments 87 and 88 therefore makes it clear that measures to remove the fining cap for professional misconduct also apply specifically to cases that involve an abuse of the legal process to suppress legitimate reporting on economic crime. Not all slaps are about economic crime, of course, but the regulator says, and this is really important, around half of its current slap investigations are indeed linked to economic crime. So these amendments provide 87 and 88 a sensible and proportionate change which supports the spirit of the bill and government policy to tackle slaps. On Amendment 89, this amendment is about closing loopholes that allow the rich and powerful to abuse our legal system and use criminal funds to pay for it. Now, throughout our scrutiny of slaps as a committee, I have learned that payment for legal advice is not subject to the same type of money laundering regulation checks as other legal services. And the Proceeds of Crime Act apparently doesn't prevent lawyers from accepting dirty money to pursue slap cases or require them to report suspicious activity. And we've held evidence sessions on this matter, and our witnesses described it as a significant issue. And addressing this is complex because, and I emphasise this, and I know I'm speaking in committee alongside some very distinguished lawyers, so I do understand that everyone should have a right to use our justice system, and lawyers will need to be able to represent criminals without prejudicing confidentiality. So I get and understand the argument that is made, and I expect to be made, by lawyers in the need for criminals to be able to seek proper support and for that money not necessarily to be money or to ask questions. However, and this for me is the critical difference, that does not mean that there is a right to abuse our legal processes and use dirty money to pay for it. That, I think, is the critical difference here. The government has stated that slaps are an abuse of the legal process, and it is therefore right to close loopholes that enable such practices. And the SRA itself has said that in order to address this, they would need to clarify the legislation to put beyond doubt that the relevant section of the Proceeds of Crime Act applies to the taking of monies for legal fees in certain circumstances. So my amendment therefore makes it clear that Section 327 of the Proceeds of Crime Act means that criminal funds may not be used to pay legal fees in order to pursue slap cases which seek to stifle reporting on economic crime. And this does not, again to emphasise, undermine the principle of access to justice, because slap cases are not legitimate forms of legal processes. And this amendment draws a distinction between using versus abusing our legal system, and makes it clear that law firms should be doing everything in their power to uphold proper standards of due diligence. So just to conclude, I'm sure that my noble friend the Minister will argue when he comes to wind up that these amendments, and indeed others in the group, preempt the MOJ's desire to bring forward legislation, and that we must wait for the three-part test that defines slaps. But as the Noble Lord Thomas has said, not only do we not know when that will happen, and as I've already said, around half of the current live cases that the SRA is examining relate to economic crime. So all of my amendments, if accepted by the government, would still work with a three-part test once the slaps legislation comes forward, but what they offer without that test is, in effect, a definition of slaps in the context of economic crime, which is the prevention of legitimate scrutiny and publication of material that could provide evidence of economic crime. So it seems to me absolutely common sense that this is something that, whilst we have the opportunity and we have the legislation before us, that we take the steps that would help us in our pursuit of tackling economic crime. So I do hope that my noble friend the Minister will respond constructively to the amendments in this group. And as he knows, because I have already written to the Home Secretary, is that I will and hope very much to meet him after committee stage and before we get to report stage to discuss this further.